Hey everybody, it's the Strega Mystica John Michael Salvato. And I know it's been a minute since I've been here. I know that I look a wreck. I apologize. The dark circles under my eyes do not indicate that something is physically wrong with me, but I've gone through some really challenging times, as many of you know. My husband is in the process of recovering from Guillain-Barré syndrome, and that's going to be quite a challenge for him to overcome with after five brain surgeries and Parkinson's and some Lewy body dementia. So I'm really focused on helping him. But tonight, as a means of kind of giving me a break, giving me something to think about, to distract me, I thought that I would follow the inspiration from my dear friend, Grace Fahrun, who is really a pioneer in bringing our tradition, our spiritual traditions, to the conversation. She is the author of Italian Folk Magic, Rue's Kitchen, and is just a remarkable person, a salt of the earth person. And she answered this 10-question questionnaire. I'm going to attempt to do the same thing if I get all the questions straight in my head, and I might jump around a little bit, and that is partially intentional because some of these questions require context, and those contexts come in the form of later questions in the questionnaire. I apologize that I don't know the person who started the questionnaire because I'm really not connected to the neo-pagan movement, and don't identify as neo-pagan. But I thought it was just such a great questionnaire. So I want to encourage you to go ahead and, of course, like this video, comment on the video, but also consider answering these questions yourself. And if you don't want to make a video, just answer the questions in the comments below, because I'd love to do that. We're in a place in our society where so many people are divided that it would be nice to find some common ground. And sometimes that common ground doesn't mean that we have the same practice. It just means that we understand the motivation for one another's practice. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. So the first question is, what kind of magic do you practice? So for me, that's not an easy or a simple answer, because Afro-Sicilian and Southern Italian folk magic, as well as esotericism, Catholic conjure, folk magic in general, are all part of my spiritual practice, and that has a very close synthesis with a lot of chaos magic, as they call it, in the modern day. But in order to understand my tradition, you have to understand that for Italians and Italian Americans, our tradition is a worldview. It's not a practice. It's not an initiatory practice. It's not a religious practice, but it has intersectionality with our religion. It has intersectionality with the regions we're from. It has intersectionality with our lived experience, because it is our way of life. And so my tradition is informed by the traditions of my ancestors, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. But it's not limited to that. So in addition to practicing Italian folk magic, which is not a religious tradition, but has intersectionality with Catholic conjure, for example, particularly in Italian American folk magic, I also practice stregoneria and fattucchieria. Um, so those traditions, that's what we would basically call witchcraft or magical practice, sorcery. And some of that might resemble some of the practices of New Thought traditions, and some of it might resemble, as I said, chaos magic. So there isn't a simple answer for that, but that is what my path is. And so the second question is, how did you discover your path? And again, like it's just the way that our family looked at life, looked at the world as far back as I can remember. And so I can't say that I discovered my path. Like Grace, I began reading cards I got my first tarot deck when I was 6. I started to learn how to remove the Mnomquah when I was 6 on Christmas Eve. But it was always part of, like, it wasn't we don't get dressed up, we don't cast a circle, we don't have an altar with traditional um, emblems and tools on it. It was the way that we lived every day. So, like, there really wasn't a place where I could say I discovered my path. I grew up immersed in my path. And so by the time I was 13, 14, 15 years old, then I was practicing with a more mindful approach. And my family would tell you that our ancestors were doing this 1,500 years ago. I received a bunch of old journals, that go back to like the 1600s and 1700s from ancestors, but they're written in partially in Sichulo and partially in Napolitan, and it doesn't. A lot of the words don't even make sense, and a lot of the words are faded. I don't understand a lot of the context of what's written. So I come from a background as a scientist, as a retired physician, and as someone whose second doctorate is in anthropology, of having to have fact-based evidence. And so if I don't see evidence of a claim, then for me it's just mythology. And there's nothing wrong with mythology, but it's just mythology. So the claim that we've been practicing the same way for 1,500 years is dubious to me. So when they say, how long have you been practicing? Well, I guess 54 years on Christmas Eve was the first time I learned to remove the Mnomquah, but really my commitment happened when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. And again, I can't really tell you that that was the age, because it was just our way of life. There wasn't a like, oh, John Michael just became a witch. Um, you know, so when they say what tradition do you follow, which is the fourth question, I'd have to say it's a non-theistic, non-pagan, old world Afro-Sicilian and Southern Italian folk magic tradition, an esoteric tradition and an esoteric worldview. And there isn't a name for it, because my ancestors wouldn't have called it they wouldn't have called it stregoneria, because that was what outsiders referred to us as practicing. It was often pejorative. That was what the church might say. That was what somebody who didn't like you might say. And so it was just our way. So the next question, the fifth question, is: Do you have a patron or patroness or deity? And the answer for me is no. I work with a number of archetypal figures, and I work with, as spiritual allies, extra dimensional beings and saints as spiritual allies. They sort of make up my spiritual court, but I don't worship any of them, nor do I subscribe to the belief in deities in the traditional sense. I believe that the concept of God is actually a word that primitive cultures used to describe the ground. The creator God is the ground of being, is singularity. And so I don't look at deities as beings that need to be worshipped, because my experience hasn't been. Now, as a patron, as a patroness, I would have to say it's the archetype of Proserpina, which is Persephone, Santa Muerte, Pombagira Tingare. Those are the archetypes that resonate with me and that I relate to. So the next question is: what is your sun sign? Do you feel connected to it? So I'm Aquarian by the Western and sidereal systems of astrology, and I think I probably definitely fit that bill. I'm really not an expert on astrology. It's never been something that I've studied, so I don't know. The seventh question is: what is your favorite ritual tool? And my answer is my mind. Because again, in our worldview, the concept of our practice of magic is a daily, moment by moment, breath by breath practice, and it all begins with the source of our power. And for me, the source of our power is creative intelligence. It's that ground of being. It's our mind, or source, or however you want to look at it. The eighth question is, do you believe in an afterlife? I believe that we're eternal, changing only in form and dimension in a multiverse. And I believe science gets ever closer to being able to prove the existence of a multiverse. And so I believe that when we change dimensions, there is some connection that we have to those loved ones who've passed on. And so a lot of people ask me, how do you do ancestral work? Because they hear me talk about ancestral work as being really a core practice for my family and our tradition. And what if some of your ancestors are not nice people? Well, let me tell you, there were a lot of not so nice people in my family involved in some nefarious things and some questionable behavior. But working with ancestors isn't about working necessarily with those people. There are ancestors that we have, like the saints are ancestors for me. The Orisha of the African tradition are ancestors to me. The plants are ancestors to me. And then there are also ancestors of place, wherever I happen to be, ancestors of tribe. As an LGBTQ person, I have those ancestors. As a trans person, I have ancestors who are trans. As a Afro-Sicilian person, I have ancestors from my culture. And so those are all ancestors. And then the family members who passed on with whom I have a relationship, some of whom I didn't have a relationship in life, who've gradually, like, not by my own good-heartedness by any means, but who in coming to me have nudged and said, hey, I would like to cultivate this relationship with you. You aren't such a bad person. I misjudged you. And so we have this relationship, and the relationship is about not me asking them for something. It's about me being of service to them because I'm in this dimension and they're in another dimension. And so if they need my hands and feet, my voice in this dimension to help them, and then it's a give and take. When I come to them and show reverence and honor the path that they're on, and genuinely hope that their spirit, their soul, their mind progresses on the other side, and I make offerings, those offerings are genuinely received from them because they're given with a clean heart. I no strings attached. But when I need them, they show up, and that's how the saints are, and that's how the Orishas are. That's how the old ones are. But for me, a lot of those stories, a lot of that mythos is just that. It's mythology. They're archetypes. And again, as a scientist, if I can't see evidence, then I don't, then I discount it. So there are some saints that are spiritual allies that I, physically experienced and work closely with, who never let me down. But closest of all of those ancestors, closest of all of those spiritual allies, for me and for my family, is Our Lady. And so for me, it's Our Lady in the form of the Madonna of Montevergine, and Our Lady of Grace, are the two aspects that are the closest to me. Question 9, that was a little bit winded, and I kind of got off topic, and I apologize. I'm really tired. I was at the hospital today for 9 hours. Are you out of the broom closet? I am out of all closets, in every way possible. And question 10 was how often do you meditate? And so for me, it's 1 hour in the morning and 1 or 2 hours each night if I have the energy. And if I don't, the most important part, I think, of my practice is that the time that I spend right after meditation in the morning is spent having coffee with the ancestors. It's kind of just practicing presence, staying in the moment, being there for them, like I said, and them being there for me. And my parents both passed this year, so it's spending time talking with them. As someone who has seen dead people for as long as I can remember, from the time I was a little kid, and would tell people, so and so is here and this one is here, and reveal stuff to them that they knew only they knew, whatever. ancestors come through to me. Sometimes, it's a message to reach out and do this for them. Sometimes it's a message of reminding me to take care of myself. It's like any other relationship, and it's like my relationships with those people when they were alive. And those are the majority of the ancestors I work with. Like I said, there's one or two, maybe four ancestors with whom I didn't have a relationship in this life, but I knew them in this life. There's only one that I never knew in this life, who passed long before I was born. The rest of the spiritual court are made up of saints from the Catholic tradition who were people, ancestors, just like my familial ancestors. And those familial ancestors, my grandmothers, my aunts, my uncles, the people that are there supporting me through life, through this journey of awakening and realization, or however you want to call it. So I hope that was helpful. I hope it gives you some insight. As I said, I don't identify as pagan because, from my perspective, what the people who call themselves pagans are based on traditions that didn't exist before the 1950s. They have a mythology that pretends that their traditions were rooted in Tuscania, in central Italy, in the Etrurian era, in the Etrurian kingdom. But there's absolutely zero evidence of that. The paganism is a merging of the magical practice, their understanding, people like Gardner's understanding of magical practice, and mostly ritual magic, and mostly group ritual magic, and their imagination of the old religions. They're not based on any ancient text that really existed. The mythology of Aradia is nonsense. It was a story that was made up, I believe, by Charles Leland. And if not him, if we give him the benefit of the doubt, then Maddalena, his informant, made the story up. There is no document in antiquity that even remotely resembles that story. And so this idea was that Leland went to a boschetto and saw these witches perform. Well, it would be like, as I've said in other videos, going to a Catholic church, and if the first people that you saw at the Catholic church were nuns, and they told you they were nuns, you would imagine that every person that came in there thereafter was a nun, and that the Catholic church was where the nuns went. But that's not true, because some of the people that come to the Catholic Church are nuns. Some of them are bakers and doctors and lawyers and realtors and storekeepers and housewives and retired people. So what Leland, if in fact he saw a gathering at a boschetto, what he saw was a religious gathering. And some of the people at that religious gathering were probably magical practitioners. But I can promise you that in our tradition and in all of the regions throughout Italy, none of them would have identified as strega. Streghe were others. It was a word that was used to make somebody an other, an outsider. So you weren't going to go to a religious gathering and somebody say, "Oh yeah, these are all streghe." That would be a pejorative term. That was a term that the church would use to kind of demonize people that were questioning their authority or threatened their authority in some way. So, and that's a discussion for another time. So I don't identify as pagan. I don't identify as theistic. I'm a retired Catholic priest, retired Catholic bishop in the Eastern tradition, and the entire time I was in service in the church, I still lead the Franciscans of the Eastern Rite, and the Contemplative Order of Compassion. But we are non-theistic in the sense that we don't embrace a creator God as some magical dude who sits on a cloud and created everything. We understand that the birther of the cosmos is source. It's an unquantifiable, impersonal energy and a source of all things. So it's creative thought mixed with divine love. So you've got the masculine and feminine that gives birth to love incarnate, to the divine androgyne. And so we see that mythos as being a representation of explaining the inexplainable. And so for me, I'm non-theistic. I don't worship any gods. I've never encountered a being from another plane that resembles the gods that I hear my neo-pagan friends talk about, who ask me to worship them. That we only find that in religions as a manipulative tool. So for me, it doesn't happen. Now, if it works for you and that's the path that you're on, I honor that, and good for you. As they say in Yiddish, "Geten gesundheit," go in good health. It just doesn't work for me, and so I just ask the same respect for my lack of theism, as you might have in your polytheism, or somebody else might have in their monotheism, or anywhere in between. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. It was really distracting for me, so that I could kind of get my mind off of the many tears that we've shed over the last 9 days, as Craig was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré and really struggled to hang in there, and dementia really started to become an issue. But he is doing better. The IVIG treatment that he received, the immunoglobulin that he received, has really helped him tremendously. And the medication he's receiving for the dementia is slowing things down for him, and I think giving him the best chance that he could possibly have as a resilient fighter, and just an amazing human being, to be able to battle this and beat this as well. So thank you all again for the love and support that you've shown, for your kindness, for your thoughts, holding space for us. And I'll look forward to doing these more often. Speaking of which, on December 8th, I'll be doing an Inner Alchemy live broadcast. So we'll be talking about some fun stuff that's coming up, including the new season of The Brew with my incredible, adorable, and so gifted and talented co-host who will be joining me. I'll tell you more about that, including who it is. And we'll have, on that first episode of The Brew, we will have two other people that I absolutely adore, who are going to be our first guests. So more on that. Hope that was enough of a teaser to make you want to tune in. And more on that when we talk to you soon. Ci vediamo.